The average American retiree dies with over $300,000 sitting untouched in their accounts. Not $3,000, not $30,000, $300,000, unspent, unconverted, just sitting there earning basis points while the person it belonged to stopped breathing. And here's what most people don't know. A 2019 study from the Employee Benefit Research Institute tracked retirees who entered retirement with $500,000 or more. 18 years later, they had spent down less than 12% of it. 12% in 18 years. You could retire tomorrow, spend like a broken slot machine, and still die wealthy. The financial industry looks at that number and calls it a success. I look at it and see an entire life of deferred living that never got cashed in. And the part that actually bothers me, those dollars represent something much more specific than money. They represent experiences with expiration dates that already passed. There's a book that makes this argument better than anything else I've read, and it's called Die with Zero by Bill Perkins. Hedge fund manager, energy trader, the kind of guy who has lived aggressively enough to have credibility when he tells you that you're living too carefully. The core argument is genuinely uncomfortable for someone like me, 10 plus years running my own business, multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars invested, surrounded by accountants and fiscal lawyers who drilled into me that the number going up is always good. Perkins' argument is that most of us are not building a life, we're building a spreadsheet, and the spreadsheet is going to outlive us. Today, I'm breaking down the actual mechanics of that argument, not the feel-good version you'd find on a lifestyle blog, not the treat-yourself influencer take, but the version that includes Federal Reserve data, behavioral economics research, and what the numbers actually say about how people spend, or more accurately, don't spend, in the final decades of their lives. This is not a book review, it's an autopsy. By the way, I built a free early retirement calculator because most online ones are mathematically wrong. It uses BlackRock and Vanguard logic to expose the weak points in your plan, and I only ask for your email to send the report so I don't store any of your financial data. Link in the description. I want to give you one image to hold on to for the rest of this video because I'm going to keep coming back to it. Imagine a gift card, a generous one, let's say $10,000, loaded onto it. You received it at 30 years old. You carry it in your wallet for decades, protecting it carefully, never quite finding the right moment to use it. Every year, you add more value to it. You contribute. It compounds. It grows. By the time you're 65, it's worth $400,000. You've been diligent. You've been responsible. But there's something in the fine print you never read carefully. The card itself never expires. Your ability to enjoy what it buys does. Every year you hold on to it, items disappear from the menu. Quietly, without announcement. The card still looks the same. The balance is still there. The menu is not. That's the gift card. That's what I'm talking about for the next 20 minutes. Every time I say gift card, you know exactly what I mean. In a few minutes, I'm going to show you what happens to the human brain when it finally reaches what it thought was enough, and why that moment changes almost nothing about behavior. But first, here's why the savings problem is even more broken than you think it is. There's a man named Earl. Earl worked for 32 years as a civil engineer in Ohio. Meticulous guy. The kind of person who had a spreadsheet for his spreadsheet. He maxed his 401k every single year since 1989. He drove the same car for 14 years. He vacationed once in his 40s, 5 days in Myrtle Beach, and felt low-grade guilt about the cost the entire time. Earl retired at 67 with $1.4 million. His financial planner shook his hand, called him a success story, and meant it sincerely. Earl died at 71. Heart attack. He had been planning to visit Ireland since his wife mentioned it in 2003. He had a folder on his desktop labeled Ireland Trip with saved articles about County Clare and restaurant recommendations in Dublin. He never went. His estate passed to his adult children. Both of them were already in their mid-40s, already financially stable, already well past the years when a sudden inheritance bends the trajectory of a life. The money arrived too late. The experiences arrived never. Now, Earl's story isn't primarily a tragedy about dying young. It's a tragedy about living small for 30 years when the math didn't require it. And the data makes it generational, not exceptional. According to the Federal Reserve Survey of Consumer Finances, the median age at which Americans receive an inheritance is 51 years old. 51. The people receiving that money are already established. Their career paths are set. Their homes are mostly paid for. Their kids are in high school. The money makes a comfortable life slightly more comfortable, and the person who built it spent 4 decades eating lunch at their desk. You think the problem here is that people don't save enough. The actual problem is that saving became the goal instead of the tool. The gift card became the point. Nobody spends a gift card they've fallen in love with. This is what behavioral economists call the saver's identity trap. Once saving becomes who you are, spending feels like a moral failure. David Laibson at Harvard has studied this extensively. The psychological attachment to a growing account balance is almost neurologically identical to other forms of hoarding behavior. The number going up produces a real dopamine response. The number going down triggers a genuine threat response, even when the math says there's no actual danger. Even when you're 73, fully healthy, with more money than you could spend in 3 lifetimes, watching the balance decrease by $20,000 to pay for a trip to Japan feels like loss. The brain doesn't distinguish between withdrawal from abundance and running out. Both register as threat. And this is where the standard financial advice completely breaks down, because the standard advice treats the problem as mathematical. Save this percentage, hit this number, follow this withdrawal rate. But the problem isn't the math. The problem is that the people giving this advice have never addressed why someone who has hit the number keeps behaving exactly like someone who hasn't. The gift card is worth $400,000. The menu has been shrinking for 30 years, and you still can't bring yourself to use it. Stay with me, because this is where the book gets genuinely interesting, and this is the part that actually changed how I think about my own allocation decisions. Bill Perkins introduces a concept he calls memory dividends. The first time I read it, I thought it was the kind of soft language that life coaches use to justify irresponsible spending. Then I sat with it for a few days, and I realized it's actually a returns calculation, a rigorous one. Here's the idea. When you have a real experience, not a comfortable evening, but something that costs you something, requires you to show up, pulls you out of your routine, that experience continues to pay you emotional returns for the rest of your life. The story you tell at dinner parties, the feeling that surfaces randomly on a Tuesday afternoon when you're sitting at your desk, the thing your kids reference when they describe their childhood to their own children. These are not just memories. They're recurring income streams with a yield that starts the day of the experience and compounds forward. Now think about the timing of that yield. Take a road trip through the American Southwest. Do it at 28 with 3 close friends, everyone's broke, sleeping in the car, watching the sun come up over Arches National Park, and not entirely believing it's real. That experience pays you dividends for 50 years. You're still laughing about the story at 75. The compounding period is half a century. Do the same trip at 72, comfortable now, nice hotel, good knees, it's a wonderful trip, but the compounding period is maybe 15 years. Same cost. Fraction of the lifetime return. This is not sentimental. This is time value of memories, and it follows the exact same logic as time value of money. $1 invested at 25 is worth more than the same dollar invested at 55 because of the length of the compounding runway. An experience at 30 pays more lifetime dividends than the identical experience at 65, not because the experience is worse, but because there's less runway left to collect. And here's where it connects directly to financial behavior. We teach people to front-load investment contributions because compound interest rewards early action. Put the money in early, let time do the work, the math takes over. But we completely fail to apply the mirror image of that principle to how we live. Front-load your meaningful experiences for the exact same mathematical reason. The compounding runway is longer, the lifetime return is higher, the yield is better. The researcher Thomas Gilovich at Cornell has spent his career studying the relationship between spending patterns and long-term well-being. His conclusion, published across decades of research, experiential spending produces significantly more lasting satisfaction than material spending. And the effect is amplified by how early in life the experience occurs. The memories compound. The stuff depreciates. You've probably heard a version of this before, but here's the number most people haven't seen attached to it. In studies tracking satisfaction over time, people who spent on experiences reported higher well-being scores even when asked to evaluate those experiences 15 to 20 years later. The memory stayed warm. The couch from the same period did not, but here's the addition Perkins makes that nobody else is saying. The memory dividend calculation is asymmetric in a specific way. A difficult experience at 25 can still pay dividends. You grow from it, you laugh about it later. It becomes the story that defines a chapter of your life. Even bad memories compound into something useful. But a deferred experience, something you kept meaning to do, that pays exactly 0 dividends. You cannot compound a memory you never made. The Ireland trip in Earl's desktop folder produced 0 memory dividends, 0 stories told at dinner, 0 moments his grandchildren inherited. The folder existed. The experience didn't. Your gift card earns interest in the account. Your experiences only earn interest if you spend them. By the way, hit subscribe if you're finding this useful, because YouTube's algorithm is genuinely unpredictable and there's a real chance it never shows you one of my videos again if you don't. The financial planning industry's official position on memory dividends is essentially, sir, our Monte Carlo simulation does not have a field for experiences you actually enjoyed. Please refer to your glide path and your expense ratio. Thank you for your business. Now I want to introduce a secondary question here, one that runs alongside the main argument and that I think is actually the hidden tension inside this entire book. It's the question I kept asking while reading it, and it's the one that I think most of the people watching this are actually wrestling with, even if they haven't framed it this way. The question is not, should I spend more? The question is, how do you actually know when you've crossed the line from genuine security into hoarding? Because the die with zero philosophy, if you take it at face value, sounds like philosophical permission to spend. And most people I've talked to who've read this book, and I've had this conversation more than a few times, they finish it, feel briefly liberated, maybe make a restaurant reservation, and then return to saving at exactly the same rate within 6 weeks. Because the anxiety didn't respond to the argument. The anxiety doesn't respond to math. The number in the account went up, and the anxiety went up alongside it, as it always does, on its own, completely separate track. I want to come back to this question at the end, because I think there's an actual answer, not a motivational one, a structural one. Sit with that question for now. Now, here's what nobody is telling you about retirement planning. And I mean this quite literally. Your financial advisor is almost certainly not telling you this, partly because the model they use doesn't account for it, and partly because the incentive structure of the industry rewards keeping your money invested, not helping you spend it strategically. Your life has seasons, not metaphorically, practically, medically, and the purchasing power of a dollar, not in inflation terms, but in your ability to convert that dollar into genuine experience, is not equal across those seasons. Perkins divides it into 3 buckets. The go-go years, roughly your 30s through your mid-50s, depending on health, high energy, high mobility, the period when your body is still mostly on your side and your ability to convert money into experience is near peak capacity. The slow-go years, mid-50s into early 70s, for most people, you're still active, still healthy, but the intensity dial is turning, comfort over intensity. A luxury villa over a hostel, a long river cruise over backpacking. The experiences are still rich, they're just different. And then the no-go years, when health becomes the primary variable in every decision, when the list of things your body will cooperate with narrows considerably, and when the dominant spending category shifts away from experience and toward medical. Here's the data attached to this framework. The Bureau of Labor Statistics Consumer Expenditure Survey, which I spent more time in than any reasonable person should, shows that household spending peaks around age 45 and then declines steadily. Not because incomes drop, because wants, needs, and physical access to experiences gradually contract. By the time the average American reaches 75, they are spending roughly 40% less per year than they were at 50. 40%. Not because they're running out of money, because they want and can access fewer things. The menu on the gift card is shrinking measurably, decade by decade. But look at when the traditional retirement system tells you to start spending freely, 65. maybe 62 if you push early retirement. In other words, the entire architecture of American retirement planning is designed to release your resources to you at almost exactly the moment your ability to fully use them begins its long decline. The gift card becomes fully accessible precisely as the menu starts disappearing. This is not an accident of bad intentions. It's an accident of history. The 65 retirement age was codified in an era when life expectancy was significantly lower, when jobs were physically exhausting, and when retirement was understood to mean roughly 10 years of rest before death. The model was built for a world where retiring at 65 and dying at 73 was the plan. We've added a decade or more to average lifespan since then and barely updated the architecture. We kept the inputs. We changed nothing else. There's a man, call him Marcus Software Architect, in Austin, Texas. 41 years old when this story becomes relevant. 2 kids, ages 8 and 11. He had a number in his head, $2 million. Until he hit that number, he was in full accumulation mode. 4-day vacation maximum, no sabbaticals, no coaching his kids' baseball teams because the season conflicted with project cycles. He was 2 years away from his number when his older kid, 13 by then, started spending less time at home, not dramatically, just the gradual, natural drift of a teenager toward his own life, his own friends, his own developing identity. The way it's supposed to go, Marcus did a calculation one night that had nothing to do with compound interest. He counted the summers remaining before both kids would be gone to college, to their own lives, to adulthood. He had maybe 5 or 6 summers where both kids would actually be home and would actually want to do things as a family. The window for shared experience with his children at the ages, they were not the future adult versions, but the actual current versions of his kids, was closing faster than his portfolio was growing. And unlike the portfolio, it didn't compound. It just closed. He took a 6-month sabbatical, coached 2 full baseball seasons, took the family to Japan, to Portugal, to a remote cabin in Montana where the lack of Wi-Fi turned out to be survivable for all parties. He came back with $900,000 instead of his planned $2 million. And he said, this is from an interview, this is real, he said, those 5 years with his kids before they became adults were the best return he'd ever gotten on any allocation. Not because he's sentimental, because the compounding period on those specific memory stories his kids will tell their own kids. The baseline of how his children describe their childhood runs 50 years forward. Was it the right decision for everyone? No. But Marcus wasn't being irresponsible. He calculated. He decided deliberately. The difference between Marcus and Earl isn't courage or recklessness. It's that Marcus understood which items on the gift card's menu had expiration dates, and he ordered before they expired. Now here's what nobody wants to say out loud, and this is the part of the book that makes people genuinely uncomfortable if they're paying attention. Let me close the loop on the question I raised earlier. How do you know when you've crossed from security into hoarding? Because I promised you a structural answer, not a motivational one. Perkins gives you a framework. There's your survival threshold, the actual number you need to never run out of money under realistic worst-case assumptions, accounting for longevity, healthcare costs, inflation, and the genuine black swans. Calculate this number rigorously, with a fee-only fiduciary who earns nothing by inflating it. This number is probably lower than the one you've been chasing. Then there's your comfort number, what you need to live well, spend freely within reason, maintain your lifestyle without constant anxiety about market volatility. Your actual retirement target, the number your plan should be genuinely optimizing for. And then there's a third number, the fear number, the one you keep pursuing past the comfort number indefinitely because the anxiety is running on its own engine now, disconnected from any specific plan or specific experience or specific goal. The fear number corresponds to nothing. There's no trip attached to it, no gift you're planning to give, no timeline. It's a larger balance that feels safer than the smaller balance. And the only way to reach it is to defer more of your life. And when you get there, it will feel exactly the same as it does now, and you will decide you need more. Brad Klontz, clinical psychologist specializing in financial behavior, not a self-help personality. He publishes in peer-reviewed journals, has documented a specific pattern he calls money vigilance, where people become so focused on building and protecting wealth that the wealth itself never serves its stated purpose. The saving becomes self-referential. You save to save. The gift card becomes a collectible you'd never dream of spending. And collectibles don't buy experiences. They sit in climate-controlled storage and get appraised after you die. The 3-level test I just described, survival threshold, comfort number, fear number, is how you locate yourself. If your current portfolio is already at or near your comfort number and you're still in full accumulation mode, you are no longer optimizing for security. You are optimizing out of habit and anxiety. That's a different problem, and it requires a different response. The Die with Zero prescription for what to do about it is a 3-part calculation. Protect the survival threshold completely, no negotiation, no optimism, no probably fine. Identify the experiences belonging to each season of your life and assign them real dollar amounts and real timelines, not vague someday plans. And then give the excess away while you can still participate in the giving to your kids when they're young enough for a financial intervention to change a trajectory, to causes you genuinely care about, to shared experiences with people who are still alive and healthy enough to have them. On the inheritance timing specifically, the Federal Reserve data I mentioned earlier bears repeating. Median age of inheritance receipt in the United States is 51 years old. At 51, most people's lives are structurally set. Their financial decisions are largely already made. The inheritance makes a comfortable life more comfortable. Now imagine that same amount transferred at 29. That's the difference between a down payment that gets someone into a first home versus a deposit into an already funded retirement account. That's the difference between eliminating student debt that has been reshaping every financial decision someone makes versus adding to a balance they won't touch for a decade. The same dollar, radically different leverage, radically different life impact. Your money has a higher impact multiplier when the people you love are younger, when they're at genuine inflection points, when a financial intervention actually bends a trajectory rather than just adding cushion to one that's already established. Every year you hold it past the point of your own genuine need, you're reducing its usefulness to everyone, including yourself. Let me give you a concrete scenario, because I want this to land in real numbers, not abstractions. You are 43 years old. Your household income is $160,000. You have been maxing your 401k for 12 years. Current portfolio value, $480,000. You have 2 kids, 14 and 17. Your plan is to work until 67, reach $2 million in total savings, then retire and travel. This is a very common plan. This is probably someone you know. Here's what the standard projection does not show you. By the time you retire at 67, your kids will be 38 and 41. They will not be waiting for you to take them anywhere. They will have kids of their own, jobs with vacation constraints, and lives with their own momentum. The version of family travel you have been mentally deferring and financially saving for the one where your kids are still young enough to actually want to spend significant time with you, still at an age where a summer trip becomes part of how they define their childhood. That version expired around the time your youngest turned 20. You are not saving for a vacation. You are saving for a version of your life that will not exist by the time you access the funds allocated to it. The Die with Zero reframe. What if you reduced your 401k contributions by $20,000 per year for the next 5 years, still contributing meaningfully, still well above any reasonable minimum, and deployed that $100,000 in capital into experiences during the specific window when your kids are still genuinely present in your life and still want to be? A real international trip annually, a summer where you are there instead of working late. The shared memories that become the emotional foundation of how your children remember their adolescence and describe their family to the world for the next 50 years. The portfolio math on that decision. You give up roughly $150,000 to $160,000 in future portfolio value over 20 years, assuming 7% annual returns. That is a real cost. I'm not minimizing it, but here's what you purchased with it. You purchased the version of your kids' memories where the parent was present during the years that form the baseline of adult memory. The memory dividends on that specific investment paid out over 50 years, multiplied across your children's own storytelling. reference in their own children's understanding of family cannot be modeled in any spreadsheet I've ever seen. But it is the only return that is genuinely non-renewable. Every other financial loss can theoretically be recovered. The years when your kids are 14 and 17 are not recoverable. This is not a pitch to stop saving. It is a pitch to be precise about what you are actually optimizing for. Because right now, most disciplined savers are optimizing for a number that they have never specifically decided to spend, on experiences they have never specifically scheduled, for a version of their life that the calendar is quietly making unavailable. So, 3 things, specific to this specific argument, not generic financial advice. First, calculate your actual survival number this year, not the number you've been vaguely chasing, the real number modeled with actual rigor. If your current portfolio is already within striking distance of that number, you are no longer in accumulation mode for safety reasons. You are in accumulation mode because accumulation is what you do. That deserves to be a conscious choice, not a default. Second, map your experiences to your seasons and do it concretely. Write down the experiences that matter to you, the ones that have lived in the someday column for years. Assign each one a season. Look at which go-go column items you have been deferring and identify which of those have time windows attached to them. Not deadlines in the abstract actual expiration dates based on the ages of the people involved, the condition of your body, the version of the experience you actually want. Those are your highest priority items on the gift cards menu. Not because you are going to die, but because the menu is already smaller than it was 10 years ago and will be smaller again in 10 more. Third, time your giving better. If you have adult children or causes you care about, your money has a higher utility multiplier earlier than later. Not all of it, not recklessly. But a deliberately timed transfer when someone is 29 and at a real inflection point changes the arc of a life. A transfer at 61 changes the comfort of a life already fully formed. Same dollar. Completely different leverage. The financial industry is structurally incentivized to keep your money invested and growing right up until your estate is distributed by a probate attorney. And that incentive has nothing to do with your actual best interest. There's an entire industry, estate planning, probate law, wealth transfer consulting, that exists specifically to redistribute money from people who saved it diligently to people who had already figured out how to live without it. This industry generates roughly $30 billion a year in fees. The system is, in a very specific way, financially enthusiastic about you dying wealthy. Lazy investing built more fortune than crypto memes. And dying with $2 million you were always meaning to spend built more regret than any investment mistake I've ever seen. The gift card expired in the wallet. The menu that was once full of things worth ordering is mostly unavailable now. And the balance, the beautiful, compounded, carefully protected balance, is going to be distributed by people in suits to people who will deposit it into their own carefully protected balances. The system repeats. Nobody goes to Ireland.